Good evening. My name is David L. Head. I'm the president and founder of the David L. Head Foundation. First, I'd like to thank God. It's through Him all things are possible, but one must have faith and belief and humble themselves. I am proud to share, and I'm very impressed with all young people who have decided to take on responsibility to share our history in different creative mediums. One is a young sister by the name of Kendra Ellis. She's out on the West Coast, who is the founder of a STEM Excellence Virtual Museum. In support of Aritas Run's effort to celebrate STEM excellence, I will discuss the life and genius of prolific inventor Granville T. Woods. When I think about the Granville T. Woods project, it's basically a twofold project. One is the story of Granville T. Woods. The other is about David L. Head. The first question that people ask me is, what inspired you to do this? And I will share that with you. But first, you must understand something. When you're dealing with history, you must take a couple factors into consideration. One is time, the time period, the location, and the social and political norms during that time frame. But the most important thing is about the lives of people. Okay? So when I begin to think about what inspired me, the project actually began in 1996, but it really didn't start in 1996. Something had impacted me as a child growing up in New York City. And I had a large family, and they would speak about my aunts and uncles, but I didn't know who they were, some of these aunts and uncles. But when we had a family reunion, I began to see the people they were speaking about. My Uncle Booker T, my Aunt Pearline, Uncle Harold. And so when I seen them and I connected the name with the face, that gave me a sense of belonging within my family. So you transfer that into a classroom setting, and they start speaking about history, about the founding fathers, about the contributions of many different people, but they wasn't mentioning anything about African Americans. And I was like, wow, I was very shy and very quiet, and I kept a lot of things inside. And I began to notice I began to feel like maybe we didn't have a history. And I began to feel inferior because they wasn't sharing anything. And so at that time, I was so young, I didn't understand anything at that time. But the images I seen were African people. They were savages, at times cannibals. You had Tarzan swinging in the jungle, and he was a king of Africa. And the way the Africans was like running behind him. But anyway, as I got older, I became an avid reader. And I began reading novels by James Baldwin, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison. Ellison wrote The Invisible Man. Actually, I felt like an invisible boy. But then I got more involved with history, especially Black history. And I was very fascinated with the heroes and sheroes that I never even knew about. And that made me want to know even more and more and more. But what really changed that dynamic was when I decided to give back. I worked for the transit system in New York City, the Metropolitan Transportation System, for 30 years. And so they began a Black History Committee in 1990. And I procrastinated. A lot of times we want to do something, but we procrastinate. But then I heard a voice, and it said, it was like almost a commandment to make sure I go down there and check out the Black History program, which I did the following year. And I found my purpose and direction in life, which still exists today. And we began planning simply for our Black History celebration every year. Who's going to be the speaker? Who's going to open up for the keynote speaker? What are some of the other people that's going to be on our program so it can be dynamic? What are some of the images that we're going to coordinate with our theme and synchronize it? And I found a sense of purpose and meaning in my life that I never really felt before. And I began to write something every year for our heritage because I like to write. I love to read, and putting those stories together about our Black heritage, that would be part of the packet. And so from 1991, I was doing that every year. In 1996, I seen a PBS documentary about transportation in America. And they failed to mention the contributions of African Americans in that documentary. And I was like, wow, I know we did something in that area. We must have done something. So over time, I decided not to dwell on the negative, and that is my motto, but to move on the positive. So I wrote something called The African Presence in Transportation. And lo and behold, what I find out would make us proud. In there was some great, great people. And I started in Africa because no one's history should begin in slavery. Let me say that again. No one's history should begin in slavery. So I began the history of Africans in transportation, going back all the way back to Africa, in caravan, in trade, in war. And so I went into the Phoenicians in the shipbuilding, coming to the shores of North America. The flagship was navigated by the Nino brothers each time he came to the shores of North America. And then I got into the Pony Express drivers, the stagecoach drivers. And then I moved into the inventors like Elijah McCoy, Andrew Beard, who invented the coupling device. And then I came across Granville T. Woods, and there was many others. But what made Granville T. Woods stick out was that I was working for the transit system. And I found out he did many things in transportation, as well as communication. So what they were speaking about the subway inception in 1998, because in the year of 1900, they began constructing the New York City transit system. So they began to share the prominent people that played a major role in the subway inception, and they should. But I found out that Granville T. Woods was left out, and he should be amongst those men. There's so much in our history that if they widen the lens, we are in that space as well. But also history is not told. And that's what the fire that burns in me to continue telling our story, especially about great minds like Granville T. Wood and so many other men that have contributed to the growth, the development, and this wealth of this nation and beyond. So I began to go on a fact-finding crusade. It was a mission to get Granville T. Woods recognized and acknowledged for playing a central role in the New York City subway system. And that journey was a very interesting journey. You know why? Because I work for the transit system. I'm not a professional historian where I have the time to dig down deep, travel to this location, travel to this out of the state, spending time, days, weeks, digging out data. I had to do that right in New York City. So the first thing I did was go to the Schomburg Center in New York City. That's right there on 135th Street. That's the largest depository of African-American history. It's right there in Harlem, okay? Arthur Schomburg. Look him up. He did some great things to keep our history in place. And so I went there. And as I began to look over the material there, it seems like it was very generic. Each book was saying the same thing over and over again. But I wanted something different. So I knew the librarian, her name was Sharon, and she said, "Is there a problem, Mr. Head?" I said, "Yes. You have something different than these books?" She said, "Well, go up to the archives. They have a collection up there on Mr. Woods." So I go up there, they tell me to have a seat, and they come out with this large envelope. And in this envelope, it was some information about Granville T. Woods. And who had put that information on Granville T. Woods? It was a gentleman by the name of Middleton A. Harris. He was a historian. And what he did was truly amazing in keeping Granville T. Woods' legacy alive. He was able to find out where he was buried, and get a nameplate by Western Electric to donate a bronze nameplate at his burial site in St. Michael Cemetery. And so I have to first give credit to Middleton A. Harris, who did this, and I stand on his shoulders, as well as Abiola Sinclair, who wrote the Black History magazine. This is Black History magazine. This is Granville T. This is, where's that at? Granville T. was in Middleton A. Harris. Middleton A. Harris, he's the one that I must recognize. And I put him in my book on the opening page in Abiola, okay? And he's also was able to get a school named after Granville T. Woods in Brooklyn. So I stand on their shoulders, and it's very important to give respect to those who came before you. So that by looking through that envelope, I was able to discover there were some issues going on with Granville T. Woods when he came to New York City and the American Engineering Company that he had formed with two other men, okay? And that led me on a search. And I began going out to get newspaper clippings because there was quite a few there, but I had to continue to find a larger story. So I would go study. I would go study to seek out newspaper clippings at different libraries. There was the Brooklyn Public Library. There was quite a few information in the Brooklyn Eagle, and there was the archives, the digital information at the New York in 42nd Street, the main library in Manhattan, huge library, a depository of history, and I was able to dig down and go through the newspaper clippings, and that's a very timely process. I was also able to go to the Science and Technology Library between 34th and 33rd Street in Madison Avenue, and I began to gather that data, and then I would take it to my job and read it, okay? And so I was being able to work on the job while I was on the clock. And I figured out a way to do that, okay? So I began to learn more about Granville T. Woods in that space. And then I ran across a book by Professor Rayvon Fauché, and it's called Blacks in the Age of Segregation, an extraordinary book about Granville T. Woods, Lewis Latimer, and another inventor. And I was like, where did he get this information from? So I looked in the back of the book, the index, and I found out he began seeking information and finding it at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. So I decided to go down there and to see what I can dig up because I want to see what I can learn. And so I go down there, think I can make a couple copies and run back to New York. No. Granville T. Wood had a lot of, he was a prolific inventor, and there was other inventors seeking to claim the same invention that he had. So that's what you call a patent interference case. I'm interfering with you, you're interfering with me. So he has to find out who, a patent examiner who sits as a judge, he has to find out who has priority of the invention, okay? And so what Granville T. Woods would do as I began to go through these papers about his life, I began to discover that Granville T. Woods, he wore many hats. Not only did he have to be an inventor, he had to be his own draftsman, he had to be his own, he had to promote his inventions, to sell them. And so he began to make an invention. And one of his first inventions was the induction telegraph system, okay? And the induction telegraph system was one of the key inventions. And then he was seeking more information on that. But I'm gonna allow Granville T. Woods to tell you that story when it's time for him to tell his side of the story. But this is my side. So as I begin to discover more about Granville T. Woods, I began to assemble this information. But once I began to assemble this information, I had to get a graphic artist to make it presentable. so I can present it to the MTA top officials. And one of the things I did that was very instrumental in getting to the top officials was connecting to the MTA, the New York City Transit Civil Rights Department. And I was able to connect with them, and I shared from the opening bell what I wanted to do. Okay, I think the gentleman name was Ken Neal. He oversee that department, and the young sister that was working with him, I think her name was Sharon, and they were very instrumental in helping me along the way. So it's like anytime you do something, it's not like you do it on your own. Her name was Cheryl George, and they played a major role, and there were some others as well. So I also recommend folks to get this book that I wrote. It took me 14 years putting this information together, but moving forward. So when I had assembled all the information, Cheryl told me that I had too much. I had to close it down to about four different patents. And the patents that I closed it down were the induction telegraph system, the electric railway regulator, electric railway system, and the dead man's handle. Okay? Those four revolutionary inventions I thought was at the forefront of Granville T. Woods. Okay? And so Virginia Fields was the borough president of Manhattan. Each borough has a president. And I had ran into her from the very outset. And some years later, she said, "You're still on it?" I said, "I'm still trying to connect with the MTA." Now, I don't know, was her influence or some other people, the president of the New York City Transit Union, or the civil rights. But in any event, I got a call from Paul Ferranges. He's the vice president of corporate communications for the Transit Authority. Yes. And he wanted to know, was my name David Head? And I said, yes. He said, "I want to come into your office because I heard you're doing something in regards to Granville T. Woods. I like to see it." And through the grace of God, I was prepared and I was ready. The graphics was done, and I had put the work in. And when I presented him, he said, "Could you make this into an exhibit?" And I said, "Yes, I have a graphic artist who can assist in that in putting my research together." So he said, "Let's go with it." So we lined it up, what we was going to do, and I shared the way I wanted to approach this with my graphic artist. He laid it out with the Transit Authority, and in 2004, it was the opening of the Transit Museum operation, A Century of Progress. And I'll show you a picture of that. That's a picture of me holding a Metro card of Granville T. Woods, A Century of Progress. Okay, maybe you can see this better because the light was glaring at you. This is a little bit better. And it says, "This self-educated African-American inventor made subway possible in New York City when he patented the third rail system for conducting electric power to railway cars." And that's when my dream became a reality. On the opening bell, they gave me the microphone, and I thanked everybody. And these were the top officials for the MTA. Okay? On the back of it, it shares the MTA Centennial Exhibit Ceremony. It was held on April 28, 2004, at MTA headquarters in Lower Manhattan on Broadway. On the left side was Virgil Conway. He was the former chairman of the MTA. The exhibit curator, that's me, David L. Head. The MTA chairman, Peter Calco. The governor appoints the MTA chairman of New York. So Peter Calco is the MTA chairman next to me. And the MTA board member, only African-American board member, was James Harding. So there I am standing there, and that was one of my most glorious days. And they were sharing information about the Granville T. Woods exhibit as well. And it was a large magazine with information about the centennial and they gave this area was about the Granville T. Woods traveling exhibit, which is behind me. Right behind me, there's 4 panels, and so this is only 2 of them. Okay? So now people told me to continue doing the research on Granville T. Woods. And I was driven to do more because there was more that needed to be done. I found out that he had played a major role in demonstrating his inventions before the third real convention that the General Electric purchased. Okay, so I wanted to do something in public, and he had demonstrated 2 electric railway systems in Brooklyn, and I went back there and I got a street name for Granville T. Woods, and there it is. It's called Granville T. Woods Way. When you come out this last stop on this train station, Stillwell train station, it is known as Granville T. Woods Way. That would happen in 2007, I believe, or 8. And there's the children from Granville T. Woods Elementary School. They came out, and this gentleman here, he's the president of the New York City Transit Authority. His name is Howard Roberts. And this gentleman here, he is the head of the African American Museum in Hempstead at that time. His name was David Bayataya, a very creative man. And he allowed, when I came out to his location, he created in a costume, which I have on today, to honor Granville T. Woods. And that he also created a bus for Granville T. Woods. Okay? And that was another glorious day. But also while I was out in Coney Island, I had informed Charlie Denson, who is the president of the Coney Island Hall of Fame, that Granville T. Woods had electrified the roller coaster. So this is the first electrical roller coaster, and it was created by Granville T. Woods. And I got him acknowledged for that in the Hall of Fame in 2008. Last but not least, Howard, this gentleman here, once again, the president of the MTA, Howard Roberts, he said, "What else can I do for you?" And doors have started to open up for me. I said, "Let's do a documentary on Granville T. Woods' life." And so we gathered the people that I wanted to be a part of that documentation with my research, and we was able to do a Granville T. Woods documentary on Granville T. Woods in 2010. And this is the Granville T. Woods Telly Award that we won for that documentary in 2010. You see it? That's my name. I'm very proud of that. And I work with some very creative people within transit news. That was 2010. So when I came to Detroit, and when I retired in 2011, I was embraced, my research was embraced by the Charles H. Wright Museum. That's the largest African American museum in the world before they put up the one in DC recently. And they compensated me, and they integrated my research into the Inspiring Minds exhibit, African Americans in Science and Technology. And so I told them, I thanked them for that, but I said, what we need to do now is bring out modern day trailblazers in science, technology, engineering, and math. And so with my colleague, Dr. Terrence Dillett, we was able to launch Meet the Scientist Saturday to expose curious young minds to STEM professionals. And we had that program from 2013 until the COVID struck. Once a month, we brought in an African American, male or female, STEM professional to showcase their legacy, what they're doing today. So I call them the modern day trailblazers. Granville T. Woods is a pioneer, but we have modern day trailblazers, and there were so many that we met that looked like us. And that truly was an inspiration and a journey for myself as well as the children. Okay, so now I like to reintroduce myself. My name is Granville T. Woods. I like for you to go back, not 50 years, not 100 years, but 150 years. Take that travel with me way back in time. And then you can understand some things about me during that time. You got to put yourself in that space to learn and see what I see, feel what I feel, to really understand what I had to go through. Okay? As a little boy, I was fascinated with the railroad. It was humongous. It had smoke coming out of the bellows. It was churning, the noise it made. I was so fascinated with that. Yes, truly fascinated with that train. It seemed like it had a life of its own. And I would go by this location on a mountaintop, sort of, and I would see it coming. And I would wave at the engineer. And that was really my first dream. I wanted to become an engineer on a steam-driven railroad. Okay? I was born in 1851. 1851. Okay? Life was much more slower than it was now. It was agrarian society at that time. People used to work with their hands. It was hard work. People used to make things. The only thing that was moving faster than a train, you had a wagon, you had a horse, and that was your means of transportation. But I was fascinated with the railroad. And due to destiny came along, I found the job in a railroad shop. Yes, working and assisting a blacksmith. I was only about 10 years old, and I was learning about blacksmithing. And I wanted to learn more about how to put the trains together. I was seeing the men working on machines, and I wanted to do the same thing. So the master mechanic said if I paid him, he would teach me that. So what little earnings I had him teach me how to make parts for the train and repair the train and eventually drive the train. Okay? And so for about 6 years, I worked in that shop. And I was looking at the blueprints and seeing how they make the parts and repairing the parts. And those blueprints were part of mechanical engineering. So I was basically learning from my hands-on, on-the-job learning process. I was learning from the blueprints, like it was a book, but I was also just putting those parts together with my hands. And the older men was very fascinated that I had a marked mechanical ability to do these things. And sometimes I did it quicker than they did. And they were truly amazed by me. And so when I heard that they were seeking a job, they had seeking workers to run the locomotive on the Iron Mountain Railroad in Missouri. They was looking for engineers. I got a letter from the machine shop, railroad shop that I was in, and I took it on up there. And I found out when I got there that there was no jobs as a railroad engineer, but there was a job as a fireman. Now, a fireman on a railroad is the one that puts steam into the furnace so the train can move. And that's a very tedious and strenuous job at times. You got to constantly be on that, putting them coals in there. And so while I was there, the older people said, young man, you need to know about electricity because that's the future. And I was like, electricity, what's that? So I was able to learn more about electricity by going to the library. But when I got there, I found out I couldn't take any books out. No, they wouldn't allow me to take any books out because of the complexion of my skin. So what did I do? No, I didn't cry and break down. I found a way around that. I got some of my white coworkers to take the books out for me. I would read them and give them back. But then I discovered that I had to learn more from a book. I had to go to school to learn more. So what I did was save my money, and I went north. And I went to school, and I started learning more about mechanical engineering with a little bit about electricity, because at that time they really didn't have any formative curriculum on electricity. But the little did I learn, and through just reading the material and working with some of the electrical instruments, I began to learn more and more. So when I came back to Ohio, I was unable to get a job as an engineer, but I did get a job as an assistant engineer on the steamship. Okay. But I didn't like working with these sailors. They was cussing a lot. They was drinking. The food wasn't good. So as soon as I got back to shore, I got back on the railroad because that's the only job I can find. But then I started to take on responsibility. And I said, and then the railroad company went out of business. I decided to open up my own electrical shop, repairing motors, anything I can get my hands on, fixing things that's electrical. And I started learning that way as well. But also I recognized that was having problems on the train. Why? Because Samuel Morse created the telegraph. But the problem with the telegraph, there was only from station to station. They needed somebody in the station to communicate with somebody that was on the railroad track, a railroad engineer, a railroad conductor, but they didn't know how to do that. So it was a problem, an electrical problem. So I began to think hard about this, and I started creating a model. It was called the induction telegraph system, utilizing wireless communication. And each model I began to formulate, it was about 4 or 5 models. I got better at it. And not only did I do that, I had people sketch. I had sketch drawing, and I had them witness it and put the date on it. So that was like documentation. I would demonstrate it out in the street. People were amazed by that, and that was key to getting people to invest in my ideas. I said, this is definitely the way to go, because I would draw a crowd, and I was looking for somebody to finance this. And I finally found a dentist that was able to open up his door in his office when the clients coming in, and I would demonstrate to this gentleman. And so what happened though, I had contracted smallpox, and a smallpox was a deadly disease. You had to be quarantined. So I couldn't make any money. I was basically laid up for quite some time. And in the long run, that helped me, because there was another inventor named Lucius Phelps that was seeking to do the same thing. He wanted to do a railroad telegraph system. But by me showing my evidence and my documentation, as well as getting an expert in electricity, it showed that I had a viable invention that was much, much more surpassing Lucius Phelps, and I won the case. Okay? Now, the induction telegraph system was a multiplex cab signal. Okay? Here it is. It connected transportation directly with communication. It had a helix on the track, and they had something like beneath the track. Then it had something on top of the track, on top of the train, and then it had a sounder, a receiver, and they recognized that it was like a relay, a magnetic relay that can connect with somebody from the train to somebody at the station, okay? And that's why it was called the induction telegraph system. It was a wireless communication, routing, and safety device, because they was having a lot of accidents on the train. So it was a multiplex cab signal. And so if you could go on a station even today, you'll see that where they have a bulletin or a monitor about when the train is coming, what train is coming. And that's basically dealing with the same device that's been upgraded, the induction telegraph system. Thomas Edison claimed that invention as well after I won against Phelps. And me and Thomas Edison went back and forth. But Edison, his principles didn't align with mine, so it didn't warrant a patent interference case. And he thought it did, but it didn't. And he wanted me to work for him, but I knew that with the invention, one invention, I could make a whole lot more money. Rather than give my idea to Thomas Edison, he would claim the invention and I would get a check. And I didn't want that. I was smart enough not to do that. Okay? And I was having problems Then I created the telegraph phony. Telegraph was like a telephone and a telephone. That's why they call it a telegraph phony, a telephone transmitter that was able to uh, be utilized to increase the volume of the telephone. It would have more clarity. It had long distance. It can be used because the original telephone, it had a lot of static. It was only local, and a lot of people didn't think it was very useful. He couldn't sell it to Western Electric, Alexander Granville. He couldn't sell it to Western Union, so it didn't have any record. So uh, it needed to be improved, and I improved it with my telephone transmitter and the telegraph phony, and American Bell system, which is AT&T. They bought that invention, and the induction telegraph system I won. But the problem was that the railroad wouldn't implement it because they wasn't forced to do that. They didn't want to spend the money, so I really didn't make the money that I wanted to. But I was able to get my name on a national front when I won beat Thomas Edison. And what I had to do was go to New York because they wanted me to continue into wireless communication devices. They started a company. And the first year they started that company, I didn't have to worry about money. I could just invent. I created about 8 or 9 different inventions that year that the company started in 1887. I gave an interview to an African-American president of a university, and it was put in a book called Men of Mark's Distinction. I would encourage everybody to read that book, Men of Mark the Distinction. Men of Mark Distinction by William Simmons. It's a very good book about great men. And he wrote that book to influence young boys and girls, African American, that they can inspire to become someone because these men have done it. You can do it as well. And so I was happy to be a part of those men. And that was my first interview. But the Woods Electric Company that was formulated, because I had my own small company, but when they came along, it just took off. So the Woods Electric Company didn't want to go along with my electric railway system, so I came to New York. And when I came to New York, I wanted to electrify transportation. But as anything that you want to do, you will be impeded all the time by somebody will get in your way to impede the progress of you. But you got to be determined. You got to be tenacious. Okay? Now, when you have an invention, you need a lawyer. I had a great lawyer named Henry Townsend. He was head of the electrical department of the U.S. Patent Office. When he retired, he started a firm called Thompson, his own firm, and he became my attorney. Okay? Now, he was able to open up doors to me that I was not able to open up with General Electric. General Electric, they seen the viability of my inventions. So when you file a patent, it's $15 to file a patent and $20 for them to issue you a patent. So you got an opening fee and a closing fee. If you don't have the closing fee on the appropriate time, you have to reapply. And so I'm always financially strapped for finances. So my attorney, what he was able to do, he was able to connect my inventions with General Electric. And here's a patent. Here's a document that shares that, okay? And this was a key document in connecting Granville T. Woods with the U.S., with the subway system, okay? This is General Electric, and this is a top official within General Electric. He's an attorney, William F. Fairfax. And so what they did, they paid for the amendment fee, and then they paid for the filing fee for my invention, and then they purchased the patent. Now, Albert Davis was head of the electrical department, and so he mentions me up here. That's why I got this panel. It's very important with Granville T. Woods and how I was able to connect him with the New York City subway. Now, General Electric is the one that electrify transportation, first on the New York City transit system and then the world. GE still exists today. Granville T. Woods not only sold that invention to General Electric, which is the third reel patent, but it was just one third reel. Like a lot of times when he had an invention, he was not able to get the right equitable compensation for his invention. So what did he do? He came back with another invention. And he did that 4 times. So General Electric bought 4 of those inventions, third reel inventions, from 1900 to 1904. And then they began operating the subway in 1904. And I was able to connect that. And that's how I was able to get Granville T. Woods acknowledged for the opening of the subway centennial. It was like destiny. That's the best way I can put it. Destiny call. I answered the call. People ask me, well, did they pay you to do this? No, I didn't do it for money. It just needed to be done. And I'm happy that I was able to accomplish this, sharing history, preserving history, lecturing about it. All that's very important in keeping our history alive. So when I'm gone, people will still know that Granville T. Woods had played a major role in STEM education in elevating society. And there are other men, but this is the story of Granville T. Woods, okay? This is the story about me. Even though I am not here in person, I live through David L. Head, who has continued this legacy and will continue to move this history of me wherever he goes. And I'm so happy that Mr. Head is a part of who I am today. And my legacy lives on through him. And so I want to thank once again Kendra. I'd like to thank David Head. This is Granville T. Woods signing off, okay? Thank you.